Snaptech IT is the expert go-to resource for all things CMMC, education, certification, preparation, and ongoing managed IT. Manage, secure, grow. Check it out at snaptechit.com.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of 123 CMMC. My name is Dana Mantilia, and I will be your host. And our guest today is Karl Bickmore. Hello, Karl. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, Dana. Great to talk to you again.
Good to talk to you, too. We have a very good topic today that I'm excited to get into in light of everything going on in the world. So, high alert, preparing DoD contractors for cyber attacks. So, getting into this right now, last year there was 400 plus million in ransomware to Russia, and there's cyber destabilization in Ukraine. And how would you characterize the current threat landscape with both of these scenarios active simultaneously?
Yeah, well, that's kind of a hot topic, right? I mean, as you're watching, I'm sure many of us are watching the news coverage. It's pretty much bonkers right now what's going on. And look, all I can say is 400 million that we know of, right? I mean, because there's plenty that goes under the radar where things get paid and people move on and it's not reported. But this combination of two of the most common sources now in a great need of resources and with a lot of desire to attack the U.S. and our resources as well, either to take them or to weaken our position geopolitically. This is a powder keg happening right now, and we're seeing confirmation of this through the reports that we're getting through the CISA organization, the FBI, and other government entities that follow the chatter, if you will, that's out there. There's a big uptick happening, and it's something that anybody concerned about their cyber defense should be concerned with.
Mm-hmm. It's scary times here right now. So, all right. So prior to the Ukraine invasion, a number of DoD contractors were hit with cyber attacks over the last 2 years. Do you know of any of these entities that were compromised?
Well, I could say I know specifically that there was attacks on the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, Space Force, believe it or not, and other parts of the intelligence community. And they're being hit in a couple of different ways, sometimes directly and sometimes through their supply chain, and then finding a pathway into them. That supply chain attack has become the let's say the attack du jour because they find an easier pathway through them a lot of the times. And so it's really the organizations, oftentimes private organizations, that link and work and contract with various federal entities that tend to be a really common way that they're finding their way into and then landing these attacks on these organizations. And then occasionally through the vendors that are used for the software they use to manage their IT or the outsourced agencies that are doing IT services. Those have been sources as well.
Mm-hmm. And this is also another reason why it's important when not only the prime contractors are paying attention to make sure their cybersecurity is in place, but also the subprime contractors, because the bad guys know that sometimes the easiest way in is through them.
Yeah. I mean, those established relationships make it easy to find ways to learn who's there, who to talk to, and who to organize around in order to launch a concerted attack. And sometimes this is exploiting vulnerabilities, but oftentimes it's just simple social engineering and phishing attacks becoming successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lot easier to fool somebody than it is to hack into the computer system. So I say
many times, yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. So what are top high value targets for Russia's integrated cyber campaign? Well, we gave them a list of our top 16 places.
Yeah. I mean, look, both Russia and Ukrainian resources, both places have been sources, but Russia more than ever, right? And I remember last year, some of the major ransomware operators, I mean, they were out in public. I mean, literally driving around their crazy Lamborghinis and stuff, and just, I guess living it up, and really, the Russian government looking the other way. It's pretty wild, the political way that this is working out. And look, I think that if you're under some mistaken that this is all just about how do they get the American money in their pockets, that's not it. There's definitely a concerted attack to weaken the U.S. as well. This is absolutely going at our infrastructure. Look, they're taking money from our small businesses, but they're also weakening our supply chain, and they're weakening our own government's ability to respond, and intelligence is being attacked. And so this is a concerted effort. So they want government agencies, they want financial institutions, anybody that has anything to do with managing money, and anybody in the supply chain. These are prime targets for them, no matter how big or how small. If they can use that to find their way to leverage to somebody on a contract that ultimately leads to a prime contractor, ultimately leads to the agency itself, that's a treasure trove for them.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's like a big medal that they get. They finally get in.
Yeah.
Okay. What type of attacks do DoD contractors and all small businesses need to be looking for?
Well, there's a lot out there that you could. I think the CISA organization, which by the way is a great thing for you to sign up to get their alerts. Any of us can. It's publicly available information. You can see the alerts that the CISA is putting out on a regular basis. Just on the 16th of February, just recently, they put out an alert regarding a specific situation, and they're seeing high levels of denial of service attack. That's where they just send so much traffic at something that it becomes overwhelmed and cripples that agency or that organization's ability to operate because their connections are all busied with this nonsense information being sent to them. Of course, the ransomware is all about getting data and also locking data away, and then collecting ransomware is also a nice benefit. There are a lot of really well-written spear phishing emails. This is where the subcontractor and prime contractor or relationship really plays well, because if they can compromise one of their emails and begin to act as though they are that person while they're interacting with the federal agency, that can teach them and give them the research necessary to discover ways and pathways in, who players are, so forth, so on. So spear phishing emails is important. Harvested credentials, look, getting people's usernames and passwords from the various methods that they might do it. They'll use vulnerabilities to find these. Sometimes they're using social engineering. A lot of times they're doing brute force attacks that are getting there. And then the last thing is they're dropping into organizations and they're mapping out. They'll get access at some level to the Active Directory, and from there be able to exploit it to get all the credentials of every user account in that environment. And so credential cache or credential harvesting, spear phishing emails, ransomware, distributed denial of service attacks, those are the main ones that CISA recently alerted on. To be perfectly frank, that list is nothing new. And it's the same technique they've been doing for 10 years now, those things.
Yeah, and the credentials, just having a conversation with the employees or sending out a notice to say, hey, everybody, make sure that you have to keep these very, close to the vest, and no one's going to call you up and pretend they're from HR or from IT, and no, we're keeping track, or we need to know what your login information is or whatever. And it sounds silly when you say it like that, but that's the simple little ways that some of these people are getting credentials, or
that points out one of the top ways you can defend from these attacks is by having a good training program. And this is something that's very attainable for even a small business these days. There are good programs out there. You can set them up and you can ensure and get reporting that your people are training, and you can send simulated tests to them and see how they respond, and find real examples of opportunities to teach them to be very suspicious of the data that they're given, and to remember to not just trust something because it showed up in their inbox. Look, the modern day workers generally actually got a sense of this, but they get fooled. And sometimes they're just moving so fast, they forget to be suspicious and really to do the checks that you need to. And that's just an example, just one of the many things you can do to defend against an attack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Getting an email from your boss or your superior, people want to act on it right away because they're like, "Ooh, I got to do this because the boss said this," and that's the hacker.
Yeah, there's a few of them that are pretty classic. That when a new employee gets hired, they get the email from the boss to get them some Home Depot gift certificates. We've seen that one many times. There's a lot of them that happen that are pretty predictable. With just a little bit of training, you can at least get rid of the simple ones and keep people from making big mistakes. But there's more to do than just that. But that is an example of just simple things that you can do to defend.
Mm-hmm. At least doing something, right? A lot of people aren't doing anything. Right. Okay, so what can DoD contractors and all businesses do today to make sure that they're ready to defend their environment from an attack?
Well, it's a great question. It's a big question. It's a loaded question. There's a lot to do for especially if you really haven't had this as a focus in your organization. I think the fundamentals are, look, you got to control your authentication, at least at first. And so things like multi-factor authentication for any type of remote access or access to any sensitive data, and also especially access to things like email or cloud solutions. Some organizations have cloud-based backup. And all you got to do to get in to see that backup is to guess a password, because there's no multi-factor authentication on it. Multi-factor authentication needs to be turned on in all areas that people can access data, they can get to things. It kills so much risk by turning on that one simple thing. And if you've resisted it, I tell you, it's a big mistake. You've really got to recognize that that's the reality we live in now, is that a username and password alone is not enough. So implementing multi-factor authentication is a really big one. The other thing is look, I can't tell you how many times we come into an organization and give them an assessment and their backup is not working the way they think it is. They've never really tested it, or they've never really got any kind of management in place to make sure it keeps working. And so without some oversight and management, backup systems don't just continue to run forever. They have to be regularly maintained. And so that's what we find so often. The other thing I think is really important to point out is, look, not all backups are equal. Some backups, if they get into your network and they start encrypting your data with ransomware, they can easily encrypt the backup as well. Or what we've seen them do is, for instance, we saw this attack where they gained access to the IT staff person's computer, and he had passwords to their backup systems stored in his web browser, because he logged into a web browser in order to access it. And so it was for his convenience, he got it. So what they did is they, at a time when he wasn't at his desk, they harvested those credentials out of the browser, which is actually really easy to do. And then they went out, and the day that they initiated their ransomware attack, they also simultaneously initiated a delete of all their backups so that they couldn't simply restore. Right. And so these are the things you have to watch out for. Can your backup be easily deleted? Do you have what's called like air-gapped backup, where, there's a copy that can't be accessed if everything gets ransomware infected? Right. If you don't have the type of backup that is strongly able to defend against a ransomware attack, you may want a different backup solution. So not only may it not be working, but you might have a bad solution in place to defend. The other things that you can do, like we talked about, training your employees is essential. Making sure you have meaningful patching up to date. And what that means is have whoever's doing your patching give you a report every time they're patching. Let them show you what they patched and what's still open to be patched. If you're not overseeing that and just assuming it's happening, well, the problem is the bad guys only have to be right once. You have to be right all the time. You have to have a regular management cycle and know that patching is happening. And I'll tell you right now, the most important thing to be patching is the place where you have external access, things like your firewall. If your firewall firmware is not up to date, you could have a vulnerability, and that's a high risk. If access to things like your servers are unpatched, that's high risk. And so, there's thousands of patches you can do in any environment, but at least get the critical ones done first and right away. I think the other thing is, just having the ability for your users to understand how misinformation can spread. This is maybe part of the training thing, but social media, websites, news outlets are currently not always spreading accurate information, and it's causing a frenzy from time to time. And so helping your people understand how to validate and verify and only react when necessary. This is more like a mindset thing, but it's an important piece. Like how you can defend against an attack is not overreact as well, I guess is a way of putting it. And not trusting that every news source you hear is telling you accurate information about how you should go about and what's going on.
That's another good point about how you should let the employees know that if something is happening, how they're going to be communicated that information. Because that's another thing that could be, a fake email could go out to the employees saying this is going on. And if no one's ever told them that that's not how you're going to be told about something, they may act upon that message. So that's
or it could be a fake email being sent by the attackers. We've seen that before too, saying, okay, it's now ready. Go ahead and put your password back in. Right. And now they're on round 2. Right. The other thing is, like most attacks we see these days also spend some time copying your data out. They exfiltrate it out. So they have a copy of it elsewhere in case you do have a backup you can restore. Now they can hold that data hostage and threaten public release and all these kind of things. So you really have to learn how to watch your firewalls, your firewall logs, your data transfer, and have really good anomaly detection stuff in place. But the key thing is I can't tell you how often it is most of the time when we are working with these businesses in the supply chain that are private businesses working on Department of Defense contracts. They oftentimes have some sense of the identity phase of their thing. They know something about their computers, but there's usually some softness there. Like they don't realize every network device on their network. Some of them have some protection in place. They have some backup in place. They've got some endpoint protection. They've restricted permissions of files and things like that. And that's good. Oftentimes there's areas where they can improve, but so few of them have anything in detection. And I can't tell you how rare it is to find anybody that actually has the ability to respond to an attack and a clear plan, no incident response plan, and no recovery plan, right? None of that's been thought through. And that's the thing that's like, look, like anything else, you pray it never happens, and maybe it has never happened to you. But I tell you, the second it does happen, you'll really wish you had that plan in place. And it really doesn't require an enormous amount of effort. It just requires some focus and attention on regularly building out incident response planning, checking it, testing it, and making sure you know how you're going to recover. Because when everything hits and there's a bad thing that happens, it is so much better to have a written plan to rely back on rather than having people just simply begin. They oftentimes destroy evidence. They oftentimes antagonize the attackers and make situations worse. They oftentimes get into a stressful situation that they didn't need to. They'll communicate the wrong thing and cause more confusion. There's all sorts of problems that an incident response plan helps you with. So I guess that's probably another thing to say, what can you do, is thinking about having an incident response plan and formulate how communication's done and how you're going to operate through an incident. Mm-hmm. That's a lot to talk about. Sorry.
Yeah. No. It's true, but also just starting, I know with CMMC, there's a lot of requirements, but for general businesses, just to put something, just to say to your employees, this is how we're going to communicate. This is who you're going to contact, some basic things. And then you can build upon that so that, you put something in place today, and then every couple of months you're addressing something else. And then at the end of the year, you would have a nice complex plan, but people get so overwhelmed and intimidated by that complex plan that they don't start doing anything. And then, something's better than nothing in these situations.
I find myself waxing philosophical on the Pareto curve and how true that is, and just all nature and humanity and economic systems. There's this really common rule that there's 20% of the effort that produces 80% of the outcome, or there's this 80-20 rule, as it's called. And so when you're getting started, maybe just focus on the 20% that's going to get you 80% of your outcome. Maybe keep it high level and think just big steps first. And then maybe run a test and see what could have improved, and just incrementally, like you suggested. So think, what's the 20% that gets me 80% there? That's a great way to think about how to write a plan or a process.
Yeah. And that's one thing too, even with some of this language in CMMC, when you're talking to these non-technical business owners, and you can get so in the weeds with some of this stuff that it just gets so, they hate it. They hate the idea of it. They don't want to deal with it. Where if you just talk to them, like you do a very good job of just talking in very plain language about very important things to do that people can understand and take action on, that a lot of people can't relay these messages in plain speak.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I mean, look, it needs to be said in business terms. It's just like I'm not good at being a lawyer, or I'm not good at being a production manager on a manufacturing floor, and I'm not good at being an engineer doing drawings. I don't know how to do any of that stuff. So it's just a matter of accepting that everybody has their strengths and weaknesses and things that they know and they don't know. And it's important that whoever is handling your IT conversation and strategy can translate it into language that makes sense to you as a business owner or a manager, because that's where the decision is properly made. IT is all about risk management. IT is all about how do you prevent and what are the things you can do, knowing where you're more vulnerable, knowing where you're strong, and being able to make sure that that's the decision you want to go forward with. You can't do everything. Budgets are not endless. So you have to pick the right thing and get good consulting advice in language you can understand so you can make the right decision.
Absolutely. All right. So what other thoughts do you have to help around those that want to shore up their defense in quick fashion?
Well, I think that it's something where you can have a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction and just start, buying or doing stuff, and that probably is not as helpful as you want it to be. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, I'm just going to buy a new firewall. I'm just going to implement a new backup. And while all those might be great things, it's probably better to actually just take a quick comprehensive look. That's one of the reasons why I like the NIST cybersecurity framework or the CMMC guidelines against the NIST 800-171, where they categorize it in identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Those are the major categories you think about your IT and be more comprehensive. So I personally think the best thing you do is get good consulting on somebody that can tell you your risk across the board so you can make a decision across the board. Maybe getting a new firewall now is the right answer, but maybe rather it's actually, let's build out an incident response plan and let's put our recovery system and solution in place, because that would be more beneficial in the grand scheme of things. Or maybe I'm missing something in threat detection, and that would be the better place to go rather than add more protection, put some detection in place. And so I think that if you fundamentally don't understand all those things and don't know about it, probably the first step is to get an assessment done in a way that you understand and you comprehensively know where the risk lies, and then produce a plan. So even if you want to shore it up in a quick fashion, I still think the first step is identify and assess what you have, measure it, look at the risk, and then create your action plan. And sure, prioritize that in the order. But I would say prioritize it in order of risk, not just whatever the first three things you can think of, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Well, this was really, really good. Of course, thank you once again for all of your expertise and knowledge here, Karl. So this was a really good one. I'm glad we touched base on this. So
great. Thanks, Dana. Take care, everybody.
All right. Yes. Take care, everybody. And we'll see you on the next episode of 123 CMMC. Bye-bye.
Yeah.